Welcome back to the Exchange Podcast. We were gone last week and missed being here. I want to go ahead and say ahead of time, happy 4th of July. That is Wednesday, I believe, right?
Something like that.
I believe it's Wednesday. So happy 4th of July, and let's party like it's 1776. Anyway, lots went on. I really wish we could have went live Thursday night for the debate. Everything was crashing. Did you see any of that? YouTube, all of it was crashing. There was something like 500,000 people that was paying attention to CNN tried to stop people from being able to stream it. And I mean, it's only like the most historical event in our lifetime. Former president. That has happened once before, but it wasn't televised, and none of us are alive to remember it. But former president versus president. Anyway, Michael, welcome back. We say hello to everyone.
Hey, everybody. I'm glad to be back. Glad to have you with us. Hope you've had a good couple weeks. Look forward to giving you a good show.
All right. Well, let's get to it. Anyway, thanks again for the Nitro Coffee give a shout out to Shadrack's. They do not sponsor this show, but if you have one in your local area, go and grab a cup of any kind of coffee. They make great coffee over there. Anyway, like I said, I mean, a couple of things from the debate was Joe Biden making fun of Trump's weight and Trump making fun of his golf swing. Personally, I thought Trump did a great job. I thought he tempered himself. I thought he controlled himself. What he should have done 4 years ago, and he would have probably got back into office because his approval ratings went up, and everyone saw just exactly what those of us who were not voting for Joe Biden, not just because we're anti-Democrats, but even in the 1980s, people knew that Joe Biden was not a good choice. He ran I think he ran in the 80s and then in the 90s. He ran a few times and didn't even get past the nomination. So when they ran him in 2020, he was already starting to decline cognitively there. Now, I mean, the very next day, well, immediately after the debate, everyone on the left was saying, hey, we got to get rid of, this guy's got to go. This guy, I mean, I've never seen a meltdown from any side, but especially the left, like I did Thursday night.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues was he spent 10 days at Camp David prepping for this.
You think he over-prepped?
Yeah, sent him into overload. And then have such a poor performance. And all of the stipulations, no live crowd, the muting the mics, et cetera, were all requested by his camp, by the Biden administration, to try to give him the best possible chance of performing.
Yeah.
Which, I think my favorite, it's all floating around, all the social media, but my favorite part of the whole debate was when Biden gives this ridiculous answer, and then Trump goes, I don't know what he said, and I don't think he knows what he said either.
I think that stood out with a lot of people. And by the way, if you're listening to us on any of the platforms and you have any questions or you want to, add in, please say something in the comment section. If you disagree with what we're saying, that's fine. That's why we're called the Exchange Podcast. We're always looking for we're looking for agreement and disagreement, indifference. Input. And feel free to jump in. But I think that was a lot of people's favorite part of the debate. I think you've got me on this. Of course, it's off the air now, but this TV show called Blacklist, and of course, a lot of it is built off of conspiracy theory. Obviously, some might be true, some might not be true, but I think one of the things that kind of concerns me, though, and I just think about this, and this is all kind of coming into what we're talking about as far as the podcast is concerned in the debate. But they've started doing this AI recording of the old. It, I'm not even going to mention his name because it was brought to my attention. We talk about him too much. But if you mention his name, you will get put down into
Shadow
the
ban.
shadow ban. So we won't mention his name. But he was a leader. He was a political leader in the 1930s in Germany.
You can ascertain it from
So you go and you listen to this AI overdub, which is English that they transfer
with the same inflection and the same style.
Yeah,
Just instead of German, it's English.
that's right. And so they translate, right? So just like you said, and I began to look at some of the comments, and they were a little bit more than concerning because it's like going. Some of these guys are saying, they're going, well, he wasn't all that bad. I'm going, no, he just killed 80 million Jewish people. Other than that, he was just misunderstood. But there's a lot of Holocaust deniers out there, and especially with all the stuff that's going on in our country today. I mean, I think some of it's starting to get tampered down a little bit with all of the protests going on. But there's someone I know who on his Instagram page, he takes a picture of himself in one of the not a jib. I think that's more, a lot of the Middle Easterners wear them. I can't think what they call them, but especially the people that are with Hamas and different things of that nature. And it's really pro Hamas. He's pro Hamas, completely anti-Israel. And I look at that and I go, it's concerning looking at how much of the anti-Semitic and specifically anti-Jewish stuff that we're beginning to see creep up.
Yeah, well, it's unfortunately, I foresee that that's going to increase because you now have them saying that war between Israel and Hezbollah, which de facto Lebanon, is imminent. Both sides are saying it's going to happen.
Yeah.
If that does, and it grows into a wider conflict, I think that the longer the conflict takes, the more you'll see these people jumping on those bandwagons. I don't know. I obviously don't have a crystal ball, but I would posit a theory that if they do attack Lebanon or Hezbollah within Lebanon, you'll see the conflict grow, and you'll see those kinds of comments and those protests grow. I don't think that a lot of those protests are legitimate. I think my own personal belief is that a lot of those people are getting paid to go out there and do it. They're being bussed in. They're not. Because if you look at we talked about this before, but if you look at the number of people getting arrested on college campuses that don't actually have anything to do with that institution, the numbers are high.
I think you're right. I think you hit on a very good point there about it is not a grassroots movement. It is people that is being paid. And I brought all that up, and especially with things like, a show like The Blacklist, which is specifically for entertainment. But I think a lot of things are done because what they're trying to do, and they've done it with, I think, many people, is they are really trying to chip away at the confidence that people have in the so-called institutions, such as the military. On the way to the podcast here today, we were talking about police. I mean, there's so many things that you cannot have a successful civilization and not have. You have to have some sort of law enforcement. You have to have. You've even got to have something. You've got to have an institution for faith as well.
Well, I was going to jump in real quick. If you want to erode a society, attack the religion, and then attack those that actually keep the peace and enforce the laws, and then you'll watch it spiral. So you've got, it's kind of bouncing back now, but post a lot of the BLM riots, police were afraid to do their jobs. And I can tell you there were a couple times where I came really close to shooting someone who was not the same skin color as me, and I'm going to be the next guy on the news.
Right.
And that plays across your mind, and then you put yourself in unnecessary danger.
Yeah.
Because you're afraid of being crucified, and what will that do to your family? What will it do to your coworkers? Like, there's a lot of baggage that goes along with that.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, nobody wants anyone to get shot. But unfortunately, we live in a world where things are they're not black and white, and I don't mean that in a racial sense. I mean that as what would normally come to a person's mind when I say that. They're not black and white in that they are right and wrong. But we live in a world that has a certain amount, a shade of gray to it, because you've always got to make certain that you don't blur the lines, that you end up doing something that goes against your conscience. And I think that's the key thing, is not going against your conscience. And one of the things that I noticed after the debate on Thursday, I wasn't so much paying attention to, I was paying attention to what both of them were saying, but I wasn't paying attention necessarily to the talking heads on the news channels and different things of that nature. I was paying attention to what I was reading people saying in all of the live streaming platforms. And one of the common things that people were talking about was the age of both, and that was even being discussed on the media channels. But they were discussing the age of both candidates, and I've gotten to the point that I'm going, when did we get to a point when age was the deciding factor? Again, I think people saw from the debate Joe Biden's performance, and that has a lot of people concerned, and rightfully so. But the very next day, Donald Trump did in Chesapeake Bay, Virginia, he did a rally, and he talked about a man who was in his 80s or 70s, and from like 70, let's just say 72 to 90 years old, he had never had money up until about 72, and then he became a multi-billionaire. So age should not disqualify us.
Well, I was going to say that you'll see people who are 60 years old who are impaired cognitively, like they've had some deterioration. But then you'll run across people who are 90 who are still living at home or still going to the grocery store.
Yeah.
It's a case by case basis. It's not a blanket. You can't just say everybody who's, say, 70 years old or older is ineligible or they're incapable. It's just in this particular case, it's quite apparent that Biden is suffering cognitively.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, and I genuinely, despite the things that he's done, because I don't believe that Joe Biden has lived a good life.
Right.
But I feel sorry for him. And I look at his wife and go, how can you prop him up there and walk him off the stage and say, oh, he's fine? Like the reality is not that way.
Well, that's one of the concerns is that today, Barack Obama said that they were going to have a meeting with him. It was him and I don't remember who else. They were going to have a meeting with Joe Biden about the poor performance debate. And a lot of people are saying that it's either going to be Gavin Newsom or Gretchen, what is her name? Whitmer. That could replace him. But the thing is, we're at a point in the election now where neither one of them have put their names in to be on the ballot. So he would have to step aside. So the concern is that he will not step, or Jill Biden, will not permit him to step aside. She's going to push because she wants to be there.
Yeah, I think this has become, and this is just my personal opinion, I have no real basis for it, but I feel like she likes the high society, being the first woman, being the president's wife, and that's why she's pushing him.
Well, so the question that came to my mind as I thought about it was, I wonder if, someone texted me on Friday and they said it was very foolish of Donald Trump to agree to this debate before the Democrat National Convention. And I texted back, I said, I'm not sure. I said, I'm leaning towards this may be the part of the genius that is Donald Trump. Because what he did was he put them, I think he knew that she was not going to permit him to step aside. And then he also knew it was going to create, because like Harris is extremely upset over the fact that they would even consider somebody else. And then she is going to protest him stepping aside to allow anyone else to run. So it's kind of going to start this inner struggle. And historically, anytime they've tried to replace a president in the middle of the term, it's been devastating for that party who is trying to do that. Especially, it happened to the Republicans, I don't know, about 100 years ago now, a little over 100 years ago, where they did that, and the Republicans lost horribly. And so I think maybe Trump looked at it from that debate and he said, hey, this was a horrible debate. And he knew it was going to be. And so he just kind of backed off, let things go the way it was going, and he knew, and he's watched the chaos as it's pursued or ensued.
Whether you like him or not, he's a genius, and he's a businessman. He's playing 2, 3, 5 steps ahead. He's thinking about, what if they do this? How am I going to counter?
Yeah.
I had 2 theories that I don't know if anybody else has had the same thoughts, but this was the earliest presidential debate they've ever had. And I had 2 theories behind it. Either one, they wanted to get Joe up there and they wanted to try to maximize his performance because they realized that he's deteriorating. Or the other option is they knew he was going to fail miserably and they wanted to give themselves as much time as possible to scramble to find someone else.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure. And neither one of those may have any credence, but I mean, it's quite apparent that he is not fit.
I've mentioned this on here before, and I'll say it again. I always think about one of the last predictions Rush Limbaugh made before he passed away, and this was right after Joe Biden. I think he had already been, maybe he had already been sworn in, or maybe it was before he was sworn in, but he was already president-elect, if you want to use that term on it. And Limbaugh said about him, he said, you will know it's the end of Biden when the media turns against him, and then Obama begins to, and I'm paraphrasing, campaign for someone else to be put in. And we're seeing that happen. I never saw a guy like Limbaugh who could predict what he did so well. I mean, he I always loved when he would come on and he would say, it's not time to panic. I'll tell you when it's time to panic. And that is really, I think, what we're needing. And I'm not just saying it has to be a conservative voice, or we are needing somebody who can kind of come in and speak.
Well, just a voice of reason.
Yes.
Period.
And by no means, nobody think I'm trying to compare myself to, but by no means am I doing that. But what I am saying is we have enough people who are talking, and again, I will always approach everything I do from a biblical standpoint. I was thinking the other day about, we always have people that are never afraid to quote any philosopher out there, but anytime if they get ready to quote something from the Bible, they will either say, well, there's a, they'll put some kind of spin on it so that they don't, well, maybe I don't want this person thinking that I'm somebody who just lives my life in the Bible. And I'm kind of going, look, quote it, memorize it, quote it. It's okay. And so I look at things from a biblical standpoint, and I think about, the scripture always tells us to be someone who tries to bring peace into a situation. And our nation right now needs someone who can speak some kind of, like you said, a voice of reason, who can speak peace into the chaos that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, well, so the Bible also says to respect your leaders, that no one gets to that position without God's authority.
Right.
So the way I've equated it in the past, I'd heard somebody, I don't know where, say this, but essentially the president is the pilot of the plane. Okay, wanting him to fail is like wanting him to crash the plane with all of us on it.
Yes.
I would like to actually see him succeed.
Yes.
But at this point, I'm looking at the pilot and going, okay, he's had a fifth of scotch. Like I would like off the plane, please.
Yeah.
Because we're going into a tailspin.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that bothered me the most was when they talk about the economy.
Yeah.
Okay, there is no ifs, ands, buts about it. The economy was better, 4 years ago,
Yeah.
than it is now. Now, COVID screwed the economy up,
Yeah.
drastically.
Yeah.
And we built back all these jobs, because people had lost their jobs.
Mhm.
Like the economy tanked because nobody was allowed to go anywhere.
Right.
That's not something you did. It's just when you finally lifted the restrictions you put in place,
Mhm.
the economy did what it does. It bounced back. There were a lot of just outright lies.
Well, he said that the other night at the debate. He said Joe, what was it he called them? Retention jobs, but that's exactly what he was talking about, was the jobs that had bounced back after after the pandemic. And he said he tried to take credit for those, which he did. Everyone knows that's what he did.
Oh yeah.
And if you keep yourself informed to whatsoever degree whatsoever with politics, you know that I mean, as a matter of fact, I think it was this last Monday, they just reported that this White House has been fabricating the job market. Unemployment is actually higher than what they. 2 weeks ago, I had something come across my phone that said unemployment was at something like 4%, but it's actually much higher. And most people that are working jobs are not working full-time jobs; they're working like 2, and in some cases 3 part-time jobs, which is exactly what we were dealing with in the Biden administration.
Well, and so here's kind of segue into another topic, but the reason businesses are doing that is they demand higher pay and better benefits.
Yeah.
For jobs that require less skill.
Yeah.
They're going to cut your hours because then they don't have to give you all the benefits of a full-time employee. So people are being forced to go and find multiple jobs just to make ends meet.
Mhm.
But the other thing that really perturbed me, I'm glad that Trump brought it up, was the energy independence.
Right.
Where we stopped drilling and now we're relying on buying oil from the Middle East and other places. We have enough here. We should be independent, and we were selling it. We were becoming a major exporter in oil, which is part of why our economy was growing.
Yeah.
I think it's foolish to rely on other nations and be at their whim and at their mercy when we have the ability to control it ourselves.
Yeah. You're right, and that is, and we were talking about the institutions, and I'm reminded of 1 Peter 2:13, where he says, "Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake, not for yours, not for yours." He said, "But for the Lord's sake, to every human institution, whether to a king as the one in authority." Part of the institution in any country, in any civil culture, is in fact the church. And we are right now in a point where Christianity and faith is in decline in the United States. Now, there are some things when you look at it, you kind of can see some embers, the winds kind of passing through and lighting those embers back up. And so it's very encouraging to see that. But they are trying to nonetheless attack every institution. And I will tell you, I sometimes wonder, and this is where a movie like, or a show like Blacklist makes me think. I sometimes wonder if Biden was not placed there to make people go, "Hey, this isn't working for us anymore. We need to install an authoritarian type person in leadership." I don't know.
I don't know either, but I can tell you that at our current trajectory, we're going to be in a much worse position in 4 more years if we don't take a different direction. And the other thing is, he would be 86 when he was leaving office. Like at a certain point, we got to tap the brakes.
We do have, and that is where I'm wondering. I will always say the best way to tap the brakes is to err on the side of the Constitution, uh, because we were given the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, as a way to establish a nation that, number one, we our founders, the Pilgrims, they believed that the reason God had permitted this nation to become a nation was to spread the gospel. So the very founding of this nation, and that was the other thing that I really enjoyed about the debate, was he talked about that he believed that abortion should be a states' right issue. No one is saying that abortion should be illegal. They're saying if your state wants to illegalize it, go for it, because there'll be 49 other states that probably won't. But leave that state alone. Just like we were talking on the way here. I will go out on a limb and say, and I'll repeat this here. I am minimalist when it comes to the government, and the federal government cannot be the arbitrators of certain things, and abortion is one of them, because who is interpreting those laws? There's what I want to know. Who's interpreting those laws? Who's sitting in the White House, like we were talking about with the Patriot Act?
Yeah, well, the danger with things like that is, like they institute something like the Patriot Act, but then they, another political party comes along and then they use it as a way to, okay, if you have anybody who has any inklings of being a dissident, you're now labeled a terrorist. I mean, you open Pandora's box.
Yes.
But going back to the minimal government, I agree, because you name me one large institution that, as it grows exponentially, it becomes more efficient. It doesn't. There are no human institutions that are extremely large that are efficient. The more the government grows, the more money it consumes, and the more waste there is. I would like to see the government operate in a far smaller footprint. Um, and the fact is, if we can send, like Trump brought it up, if we can send $200 billion to Ukraine, where's that money coming from? That means we're getting taxed too much.
Yeah.
Like that money's got to come from somewhere. And, the other thing is we're spending money hand over fist, far beyond our actual, like if it was a household income, we're living on every major credit card. We've got Visa, MasterCard, like we're maxing them all out. And we're spending more than we're making.
Well, and right now people are forced to do so.
Yeah. It's.
I was living in Nashville, Tennessee when Donald Trump got elected. I moved there in 2009. And I was there for pretty much all of it, the 8 years, because Obama was elected in 2008 and then reelected in 2012. So I was there for all 8 years of his presidency. And I got to thinking about this the other day. The majority of my working years have been under a Democrat president. And then Donald Trump was elected in 2016. And those 4 years are the only time that I had money where I was paying my bills, buying my groceries, and still having money to put back in a savings account.
Well, so the first police department that I worked for, we had a 401k, and it was through TIAA. And I saw under Trump, like I had a decent amount of money. And then as soon as Biden took office, it tanked. Yeah. And it is just now getting back to where it was 4 years ago. And I'm going, great. Instead of growing, it grew.
Stagnation.
It grew, and then it just absolutely tumbled to where it was literally like half. And then it slowly worked its way back up, but it took it 4 years. That could have been 4 years of growth instead of.
I guess what kind of makes me curious about all of this is if this is intended, and I do believe that this is all intended. I do believe that it's guys like John Podesta and Barack Obama who are actually running the White House. I do believe that. I've wondered why, and I guess it's because they've had to really double down to get rid of all of the policies and all the successes that Donald Trump had in those 4 years. But why they've not tried to temper it a little bit if they want it to completely collapse? Why they didn't try to temper it a little bit until another 4 years and then just kind of open the floodgates on it?
Honestly, I don't know. I couldn't tell you. I do believe that there are people that operate within our government or that they have dealings with the government, the extremely wealthy that operate behind the scenes that do want to see this country fail.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's been since the founding that there are those that want to see the
There are
country fail.
people that want to undermine the success of
Mhm.
the United States. And I don't know. I guess that's one thing we may never know. But
Why they want to see it fail?
well, no, whether how much they actually are purposely contributing to the current situation.
I think we can look at guys like George Soros and see what he's done with other nations, such as he did with England and other nations that he, because where is it that he's got an arrest warrant? He cannot, is it England? He cannot go there. And it's because he put so much money like he's doing here. He knew that America, the United States, was going to be harder and it was going to take longer to happen. But yeah, I mean, you go back all the way even to the founding, you had people that were deliberately trying to work towards the destruction of the nation, because I think that's human nature. America was the antithesis of what many of your European elitists were trying to accomplish. And that's what we're seeing is that European elitism that, because that's why that is why that our founders put there about holding, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that every man is created equal with certain inalienable rights endowed to him by his creator, and his creator is in capital, or his creator's in capital. But that's why they put that in there, because that was to tell the rest of the world, especially those coming from Europe, hey, we're not like them. Your rights come from God, not from a monarch.
Yeah, well, and that may very well be the reason that they're seeking to undermine it, because there are those out there that are so power hungry. They don't want you or me or the average person to have any power,
Right.
to have any say. They want it to be run by a handful of elites that have all the power, and then they can just squeeze you.
Yeah.
And that's, I've talked about it. People probably get tired of hearing it, but that's the danger of becoming dependent on the government.
Right.
When the government wants to give subsidies and handouts and wants to do all these things, it's to rope you in.
Yes.
So that you are dependent on them, because then you have no choice but to go with whatever direction they go.
Mm-hmm.
It's why places like China, with their social credit score, you make a rule. Well, North Korea, how about that? There was a headline yesterday where they publicly executed a 22-year-old man for listening to K-pop, which is, like
they executed him.
Oh yeah, publicly.
I hadn't heard about this.
For listening to K-pop, where
was this?
In North Korea.
Oh, yeah, because music is all Western. Anything Western is always forbidden. In
what kind of insanity, But that's you think that it can't happen.
Well, I think
but it may not happen as quickly, but it can absolutely happen if they erode just a little bit at a time.
Well, I think we've been seeing the attempt to make that happen ever since 2019. Was that
2020?
Yeah, but when was that the summer of love, as they like to refer to it, where they were rioting? Was that 2020?
Well, so that I was referring to. You had COVID, and then you had all the riots.
Oh no! Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Is the riots.
everything was in full swing.
We've seen it, but I think that was the first time that we saw it at such a belligerent level that we began to see it at. And so basically, uh, um, what we had is that we had uh, the, uh, the the riots, and so we saw where they were trying to build this coup, if you will. That was the word I was trying to think of, was this coup. And the next thing that you had was then you begin to see all this subterfuge and undermining that we're seeing now. And so ultimately, the idea is if you can undermine all of these institutions, so one of the things, and this was the point that I was wanting to get to, kind of lost train of thought there for a minute, but what I think we saw that with CNN trying to be the only provider for the debate on Thursday night. I mean, that's a national, that is a state owned news tactic right there, because they can control all the narrative.
Well, that's the same thing that the communists did.
Yeah.
You know, if you only put your story out and you only allow your side of the story, I mean, you can control the narrative.
That's right.
It's extremely dangerous. Here's the thing. Why would you stop people from wanting to see it? This affects everyone, you know, and you have to look at the motives.
Well, they went from, which is typical, which I've known this from my time working with TV and in radio. You've had, there's always a 7-second delay for, a multiple of things. Typically it's, in case somebody says a word that cannot go across, SEC standards, or FCC rather, sorry. And I'm not thinking football. There is another SEC besides football, but FCC standards. And so they block it for that purpose. But they went from 7-second delay to a 1 to 2 minute delay. Well, all of these shows all of these different streamers started streaming on X, they started streaming on YouTube, and I think there was some other Rumble. They did that, and then there was like this. I mean, I wanted to stream it here, but I began to look at all of the things that went on that you had to do, or else they would kick you off for at least a week, and there could be lawsuits, which is completely anti-American. But they were doing this to make it hard on people to be able to stream it. And you're going, wait a minute, we're seeing this erode little by little, and they are trying to move towards a state-run news media.
Yeah, well, I'd sent you several clips where the government is communicating with other agencies or news stations to try to control the narrative.
Yeah.
It's insane the amount of footage from January 6th, because that keeps coming up, that has been scrubbed because a lot of the insurrectionists or whatever they're calling them were allowed in.
Yeah.
And then, they're trying to flip the script now. I like when they were pressuring them on how many federal agents were actually present. And they wouldn't give a number because they didn't deny that they were there.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. That's the kicker. They never said, oh, we didn't have any. They just wouldn't give an exact number because I think that it was a setup to a large extent. What you're seeing is elements within the government, or not even the government, that are looking to undermine a presidential candidate.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why they've been so fervent to try to prosecute him on things. If you look at any of the presidents, essentially any of the presidents from my lifetime, you could find something on which to prosecute them. They've only gone after Trump. If you look at Hillary, I mean, she deleted how many thousands of emails after they were subpoenaed. She had illegal servers. They dumped bleach on them and beat them with hammers. I mean, it's insane. The fact that a lot of this is allowed to go on, and that they've weaponized a lot of our federal law enforcement, especially the Department of Justice. And anybody that says that they haven't needs to examine the facts, be impartial, and just look at how they have gone after one particular person as opposed to the multitude of other people who have committed far more serious crimes.
Well, and you look at also the very vague and shotgun effect, if you will, of all of the charges. They're, it's things that, number one, there is a statute of limitation on, but those were ignored. And I'm reminded, kind of as what we're talking about here, in Ephesians chapter 2 and verse 2, Paul writes, and he says, in which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. And, Jesus talks about, he says that Satan is the god of this present age. And I'm reminded, when I read that, I'm reminded of a pastor that, he's still alive. He's much older now, but I mean, this was years ago. And he was talking, and he was talking to my dad. They were having a conversation, and he made a statement, and I believe this to this day. He said, I don't believe in a conspiracy theory such as what we would call the cabal, right? That's a word that goes around, and a shadow government and deep state, which is deep state's really the most popular. When I say I don't believe in that, I'm going to say, let me preface that with this. I do believe there are characters in place that are doing such a thing. But I don't believe in the conspiracy theories that we hear so much as far as any one human or any group of humans. And when he said this, it put it in perfect perspective. Because there's not any one human or any group of humans smart enough to pull it off. But that scripture that we just read talks about Satan being the prince and the power of this air, and Jesus says he's the God of this present age. It is that when you hear all these people talk about globalism, that is what we're talking about here, because he is trying to drive everything to a globalist. It goes all the way back to the book of Genesis, when Nimrod tried to pull everybody. The Tower of Babel. And see, here's God confused and confounded the language of the Tower of Babel. But at the book of Acts, the Bible says that there was a cloven tongues of fire, and that every man spoke and they could understand in their language. Pentecostals would call it speaking in tongues. You got to understand that God, he talks about the tree of life is in the middle of that city in Revelation for the healing of the nations. God loves nations. It is not a good thing when we're trying to pull everything to a globalist ideology. There is one person that's trying to do that, and he's not Christ. The Bible calls him the Antichrist.
Yeah. Well, if God had intended for us to be distinct and different peoples, he didn't want just robots where everybody's the exact same.
That's right.
You're exactly right. What you're seeing play out is what a lot of people, whether they realize it or not, they're watching firsthand spiritual warfare.
Absolutely.
And they're seeing the consequences of good and evil play out right before their eyes. That spiritual darkness in high places. So,
yeah.
I mean, there's a whole lot of that floating around.
I think every generation goes through different things in their life. I think every generation is at a pivotal point in their life. So I don't think our generation is necessarily any different. What I do think is we're at a different timeline, obviously. That goes without saying. But I think when I say that, I mean that I think we are at a precipice now where, I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about how many people want the end times. And a lot of people just want all of this to be over. Not even people that are Christians. And I do think that all of the social media that we take in, all of the stuff that we take in, I think that a lot of it I think that contributes to a lot of it. I think a lot of the mental anxiety and illness that people talk about, it comes from that, because we have as humans, we have this inordinate problem if I can use that word, if that word goes, to compare ourselves to what everyone else is doing.
Well, so the thing about a lot of these social media influencers is their life looks so great and so grand, and what you don't realize is they're completely miserable. It's
Yeah.
all a show.
Yeah.
It gives you a false sense of reality. And we talk about kids having issues with when they play these because now they're getting games where it's far more realistic than when we were young.
Uh-huh.
They start to have a problem differentiating between what they watch or what they play in reality. It's no different with adults.
Right.
They look at these people and go, they look so perfect. And what they don't realize is it's photoshopped. And
Yeah.
life is really not as glorious
Right.
for them as it appears. And so they get this false sense they feel inadequate, or they feel like, I just wish my life could be like that. And they
Yeah.
fall into this depression. Really quick segueing into another issue, where the social media, Facebook and Instagram were trying to stifle the debate, and they had changed the algorithm so that the political stuff wouldn't reach as many people.
You're talking about during the debate?
Yes.
No, they were trying to control it. I mean, because you've got so many people, and that was kind of what I was saying. I think every generation's at a pivotal point. I think that I've never thought about this until recently, but kind of going back to something you said, and I wanted to mention this. It reminds me of that movie Just Married with Ashton Kutcher, where he's talking to his dad because his marriage is completely falling apart. Him and his wife are separated. They're talking divorce, and his dad says, "Look." And I think he picks up a photo album, and he says, all of these pictures only give you a snapshot of, good times in people's lives. He said, but what you don't see are the moments between those snapshots that they have to make a decision that they're going to work it through. And that's where I think a lot of us have to realize, one of the things that someone said about the debate, they said, well, I'm done with both of these two because, we want a statesman. Well, I think we have this romantic view of what a statesman was or is. A lot of what we call statesmen were diplomatic people that tried to use, certain political diplomacy, for a better word. And it's got us to where we are now. And that is that the government has far more power, far more input, far more say into the lives of the American people. We put a premium on the President of the United States that the founders never intended for us to do. They intended for the U.S. government to be so busy that they didn't have time to meddle in the life of the American people.
Well, we've attributed far too many topics to the federal government as well. Case in point, abortion.
Yeah.
Anything not specific, that's what the 10th Amendment is about. Anything not specifically listed in the Constitution
right.
is left to the state.
That's right.
Well, last I checked, traffic laws, abortion, things like that are not listed. So those are things that the state is going to determine or should determine. We rely far too heavily on the bureaucracy in Washington to determine what's best for the entire country.
Oh, absolutely we do.
And that's led to a lot of our problems. Okay, the thing is, if you like California's policies, then stay in California.
Yeah.
Don't come to other states looking to change their policies.
Right.
We've befuddled. States used to be far more important in our past history.
Yeah.
And there were some distinctions, but there were some common themes. But it was a state by state basis.
Yeah.
Which is why the Civil War played out the way it did. And certain people, we talked about Lee, Robert E. Lee said, "As Virginia goes, as do I," because they had an allegiance to their state.
Right.
We've lost that. It's almost like globalism, but on a much smaller scale.
Yeah.
We just want to paint everything with one broad brush.
Right. And you can't.
No.
Well, and that was kind of what I was talking about too, was that when you look at different points of history, there's always been there's always kind of been that one, two, maybe three people. I mean, you can go all the way back to the Revolutionary War, and you had several people that emerged as you know big influencers. You had the Thomas Paines and the Alexander Hamiltons and guys like that. Uh, but at the end of the day, you had the George Washingtons and the Thomas Jeffersons that actually emerged as the biggest names that everybody, most people can just automatically name off the top of their head. And then you kind of come on down. And you got one of the things that I've been reading that book, Team of Rivals, which is about Abraham Lincoln and how he picked his cabinet. And one of the things that Abraham Lincoln actually was concerned with was feeling like that there wasn't anything left for his generation to do. Well, little did he know. He felt like that all the great stuff had been accomplished by the George Washingtons and the Thomas Jeffersons and the Alexander Hamiltons and so on and so forth. And little did he know what was going to come down. And that is why that we have to stay in life. We have to stay in the game because we don't know what it is that we do. I mean, Paul Revere was a silversmith who just came to the service of his country, and I mean the rest is history. We don't know when that time is going to come. You know what I mean?
Well, on 9/10/2001, we were all going about our lives as if nothing was going on. Everything changed that next day.
Yeah.
You never know what's right around the corner. You got to stay sober-minded and be vigilant.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that work. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say there's no telling. And, we were all put here at this specific time because, that's something I used to wrestle with. It was like, how do I raise my kids with the way society's going?
Yeah.
But, they're here in just the right time where they were intended to be.
Right.
Because they may do something that alters the course of history. I mean, you just don't know.
You don't. I mean, it's, of course, this is not a positive way. This one's actually kind of a very disturbing way. But, most people have heard about the Haktua girl, and you heard about her?
Well, so I was completely confused because what I do is I'll normally go to, on my phone, I go to Google and I'll just hit the search bar and it'll have all the trending. And I'll be honest, I thought she was a Native American. I thought, legit, as crazy as it sounds, I thought it was a Native American name.
I saw a meme that said that Miami Dolphins had signed Tua's sister, Haktua. And, that was the thing. And of course, I bring that up because, I mean, we just live in a time with all of social media. Anything could happen. I mean, it's kind of like, what was that, 7-8 years ago now that the Chewbacca mom. Remember that?
Where she was laughing.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we live our life trying to become famous or big influencers or anything of that nature. But what we don't know is just by going about our everyday life, what it is that God could allow for us to do that. Like you said, it could change the course of history. I mean, that's why guys like, Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin would say, that they believed that the hand of divine providence, altered the course, changed the course, directed the course. They were always giving, recognition to God being the one behind that. All you got to do is just get up every day and just live your life. You never know when that moment comes.
Yeah, well, and so that's why it is so important. And this is something I've learned because I spent, despite my current prognosis, I spent a large part of my life being very pessimistic.
Mm-hmm.
Going, I'd go to work and I'd tell my wife, I don't know how I'm going to make it. Like, how am I going to make it to retirement? That's why it's so important to speak. There's power of life and death in
That's right.
To speak life and to speak positivity into those around you.
That's right.
Because, we look at somebody like Billy Graham.
Mm-hmm.
The person who influenced Billy Graham could could potentially have been a nobody,
Yeah.
or no-name person. You don't know what your interaction with someone else is going to bring about. Um, and that's why, like I said, the tongue is a double-edged sword. You can use it you can wield it for good or for evil. It's really important to be positive, talk each other up, and only speak life over each other and over yourself. And I think that's what a lot of people have drifted away from. It's grumbling and griping, and sometimes that does happen. Okay, we're human, we're fallible, we get upset.
Yeah.
But not dwelling there, and you'll find that you're a much more positive, happy person, and you'll find the people around you are influenced in a good way by your attitude.
You're right. And like you just said, I mean, when you look at the people that, that were, that were used to lead Billy Graham to the Lord. I mean, there's so many different people that you can go all the way back to, different preachers. I mean, I pulled something up, and that's what I was kind of looking for, was to see who all the people was that actually contributed to leading, or that would ultimately come up to Billy Graham. And we were talking about this the other day. One of the things about, the Bible talks about us going on to our reward. We're going to stand before judgment seat. We're going to be judged. We're going to give an account, and we're going to be, our works will be judged. And so when you're doing something, one of the reasons why there is a judgment seat of Christ is because of the fact that the work you're doing now, if there's another 100 years or 200 years that goes on, what you do right now is going to continue to compound throughout the centuries. And when you look at, I mean, it goes all the way back to people like Dwight L. Moody, Wilbur Chapman, which a lot of people don't even know who that is. And then Mordecai Ham, Billy Frank, and then all the way. I think Billy Graham, yeah. Well, Billy Frank, he became known as Billy Graham, so he was not always known as that. But you've got different people that contributed to what ultimately would bring Billy Graham to where he was. So all of the people that Billy Graham led to the Lord
will ultimately be attributed
to those men.
Yes, all those that came before him. And that's the thing that a lot of people need to also keep in mind. So if I used to look at it, working as a police officer, I used to say, if I could ever just truly save one person, it makes it all worth it. All the sacrifices, all the holidays I missed, all the birthdays or family events. But how much more precious is someone's soul? And if you save that one person, even just one, you shouldn't set your goal there, by the way, with just one.
Right.
But if you only truly saved the one person, and that one person went on to save 3 or 5, and then those 3 or 5 grow on to save 25 or 30, like it could exponentially grow. You don't know the value of what you're doing, and you will never know.
Well,
until you sit before Christ and you realize you had a much larger influence than you ever imagined.
If I just mentioned the name Edward Kimball, most people would have absolutely no idea who he was. And that's what the writer of this article says. He says, rest assured, most people have never heard of him. But Edward Kimball, he was just a Sunday school teacher. And who not only prayed for the hyper boys in his class, but also sought to win each one to the Lord personally. He decided he would be intentional with every single last one of them. Surely he thought about throwing in the towel. If you have ever taught the Bible to young boys, you know that the experience can often be like herding cats. One young man in particular didn't seem to understand that the gospel was about what the gospel was about. So Kimball went to the shoe store where he was stocking shelves and confronted him in the stockroom with the importance of a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That young man was Dwight L. Moody. So Kimball leaves Moody to the Lord. Then Moody, history says that he was the man who touched two continents, both England and America. And the story doesn't end there. Moody is the one who led Wilbur Chapman to the Lord. And then Wilbur Chapman is the one who led Billy Sunday to the Lord. Do you know who Billy Sunday is? Billy Sunday was an evangelist in the 1930s. He had actually been part of the baseball team, was that the 1918 or 1919 World Series, where the White Sox threw it. And they would become known as the Chicago Black Sox. They threw the World Series. There's a movie called 9 Men Out. I think there was a book. And so they throw that World Series, and Billy Sunday played for that ball team. And then later he left there. He was traded, I think, to the Philadelphia Phillies. And then as time went on, he became an alcoholic. So Wilbur Chapman leads Billy Sunday. Billy Sunday is the guy who really is the one who gave the classic altar call. He was really the guy who started that. The altar calls that we know them to be if we've been in church any amount of time. He was the guy who kind of got that started. And then he led Chapman, Mordecai Ham to the Lord. And then Mordecai Ham is the one who led Billy Graham to the Lord. So there's been that chain of events, and every one of those men will share in those rewards. And that's why that, what I'm saying is it's like we just have to forget and quit listening to all of the stuff that's going on in our world and realize, hey, I've just got to get about being about what God's told me to do and what I feel like he's led me to do. The scripture tells us whatsoever your hand finds to do it with all your might, and just do it, and let God sort that out.
Yeah, well, so what I would say is don't focus so much on, if you look at social media, if you look at the rates of depression and mental illness, they've skyrocketed since the institution of social media.
They have.
Because like we said before, you only see the most positive upsides, and then you inevitably compare yourself to those people and go, why am I not having this success, or why is my life going like this? And it becomes a very detrimental thing. Not saying that you can't use social media, but view it in the light of that's the 0.5% of that person's life.
Yeah.
You don't see what's going on the other 99.5% of the time. I would actually posit, why don't you go visit that person face to face, or actually call them instead of doing everything through social media, and actually build those relationships and get closer to one another. Actually, exchange a conversation, or grow, because those kinds of things are not going to get you where you want to be in your relationships with people.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, a lot of those companies do not have your best interest
at
heart.
That's right.
They're extremely controlling, and when it all comes down to it, it's all about money. They could care less about what it does to you.
That's right.
As long as their profit margin's growing. But build genuine relationships with people.
That's right.
And face-to-face contact, or a phone call.
Yeah. Go and talk to the people.
Let's get back to actually interacting instead of using a screen. And especially if you live in close proximity, there's no reason why you couldn't, spend an hour or two. If you truly care about someone, you can sacrifice a couple minutes to call them.
Yeah.
Or if you live in close proximity, go and visit with them. Go to lunch.
Yeah, that's
do
right.
Something instead of sitting on that little device that's got you sucked into an alternate reality.
No, absolutely, and that is we do not live our life on that device. We live life out in the world, or we should. But that will bring us to the end of another podcast. This has been a great exchange, and I am thankful for the people that have been listening. Thank you. Please like, subscribe, share, tell a friend, and join in on the exchange. Send your comments, send your questions, send your input. We welcome it all. Michael, what do you got?
Oh, I was just going to say we can't do this without y'all. So we really appreciate the support. Please, if you can't, it takes a couple seconds. Just leave a quick comment, something to bump the algorithm to try to get it out there to other people. The last little bit of wisdom, I'll pause it with you. I'll go back to it. If you really truly care about someone, check in on them. So many people these days are fighting depression. They've got, everyone has their own issues. And sometimes they're just wanting someone to reach out and talk to them. Be the friend that you want.
Yeah.
And you'll find that you'll have much greater satisfaction in your life, and they will as well. And you'll find that your relationships grow and that you grow as a person.
That's right.
And then if they don't have a personal belief in Jesus, have that talk with them. Have the courage to say something, because that may be the key that they're missing. And they will find that peace that surpasses all human understanding. And with that, I'll leave you be till we follow up next week.
All right. Again, thank you for joining us. And until then, be blessed and have a great week.